Welcome to EdLeader with your host, Dr. Rob Jackson. Join Dr. Jackson for conversations and reflections on improving educational leadership from the classroom to the boardroom and beyond. Educational leadership is an ever-evolving opportunity to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of students, parents, and the community. And now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Jackson.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the latest weekly episode of the EdLeader podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jackson, and I want to thank you for spending time with me today. The podcast was recently highlighted in an article by EdNC. The feedback that I'm receiving for the EdLeader podcast is incredibly humbling. I certainly want to say thank you for making the EdLeader podcast a part of your personal professional development. A special thank you, of course, to all of our many guests as well. Speaking of guests, I have an extremely special guest today with a powerful message. Let's get to it. I'm excited to welcome a true teaching and learning guru to the EdLeader podcast. Dr. Donyall Dickey is a nationally recognized authority on curriculum and instruction. Unparalleled levels of student achievement and school improvement distinguish Dr. Dickey's 20-plus year career as an educational leader. He's a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, also of Loyola University in Maryland, and George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where he earned a doctorate in educational leadership and policy and wrote a groundbreaking dissertation on resilience among African American boys. Dr. Dickey has led at just about every level in public education. After a decade of successful site-based leadership, Dr. Dickey served as an assistant superintendent and chief academic officer of the nation's 8th largest school district, and later as chief schools officer and chief academic officer of a prominent school district in the Southeast. In each case, his leadership resulted in record gains in student outcomes and significant improvements in organizational effectiveness. Dr. Dickey's ideas for closing the achievement gap and structuring schools and districts are used in schools across the nation to improve the quality of the teaching and learning experience for millions of children and staff members. Please help me welcome Dr. Donyall Dickey. Dr. Dickey, what an absolute thrill to spend time with you today as we start this brand new decade, this brand new year. I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to have a great conversation with you and look forward to our time together. Welcome to the EdLeader podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for the invitation. I am honored to be with you today and happy to be here with your listeners.
Thank you so much. I tell you what, and I want to just dive right into it. I've had the absolute pleasure to hear you speak on a number of occasions and absolutely just appreciate it so much. I've shared with others that in some ways, for me anyway, you're the voice crying in the wilderness. In my background, was an elementary teacher, and so teaching literacy and literacy skills across core content areas and across the entire curriculum is what I did, and the reason and my focus for being an educator. As an educational leader in administration, sometimes we get caught in so many things. It's the tyranny of the urgent versus the important. And so we get busy with bus issues and we lose focus on what's really important. We're always focused on the kids, but we lose focus on what's really important in education. And every time I hear you speak and you talk about the importance of literacy, it draws me back. And I'm just so appreciative and grateful for the work that you're doing in and around literacy. Dr. Dickey, thank you for doing that work. Thank you for calling out to all of us. I truly appreciate it.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure, Dr. Jackson. It doesn't really feel like work to me. It feels more like fulfillment of one's purpose. And what you just said about urgent versus the important certainly resonates with me because I understand education to be a way up and a way out. And so having grown up in abject poverty as a little person, I know well the power of access to a solid education. And so it is our responsibility as educators to ensure that we produce a schooling experience for children that is fully worthy of consumption. And so there are other things that are going to always distract us, but our responsibility is to produce for our customers, and students are our customers and their families as well, an experience that is worthy of their consuming it.
Absolutely. I tell you, recently when I heard you speak, you talked about what we're all going through together as a community and as a country and as a world. And that, of course, is the pandemic. And you said that the pandemic's really shed a light on what we already knew about equitable access. And you spent some time really talking about equitable access and what that truly is. And that may not be what others immediately think in terms of, when I talk about equitable access, are we jumping on technology? But technology is just a small part of it. When you start talking about equitable access, what are you talking about, Dr. Dickey?
Yeah, sure. Look, we live in the age of accountability, Dr. Jackson, and we as educators are judged up against a set of standards as it relates to ELA, as it relates to mathematics, science, social studies, and even the elective courses. Even our CTE courses, they're built on standards. And so I'm not a proponent of standards as much as I am a proponent of, if children are going to be, a door is going to be opened or closed in their face based upon their knowledge of a set of standards, and we've got to give them access to knowledge related to those standards. And so, norm reference and criterion reference assessments at the end of a grade or at the end of a course are used to judge the extent to which children have been exposed. And it's unfair to children to put in front of them at the end of a grade or at the end of a course a standards-informed assessment, but they've not been exposed to standards-informed instruction throughout the entire school year, semester, or what have you. And so if children, have to, determine the main idea of a text, then everyone in their instructional ecosystem has to calibrate on what it means, on what main idea is and what main idea is not. So it is not necessarily just about the standard. It's about the concepts that reside inside of the standards, and we must calibrate on what they mean so that children don't become what I call, Dr. J, instructionally schizophrenic. They go from one course, right, to the next course, and they're asked to determine the main idea, but the educator's expectation of what main idea is shifts a bit. So that confuses our children, and they hear voices. And what I mean by that voices, they hear the voices of people who care about them, but people who have not calibrated around the expectation for concepts that reside inside of the standards.
Dr. Dickey, I tell you, I feel like I am in educational church. I am ready to shout amen. I love talking with you. And, you start talking about the standards, and you talked about main idea. And main idea, of course, is a part of what you refer to as the universal language of literacy, and this ubiquitous access to the universal language of literacy. Talk to our listeners for a little bit about what are these 36 terms that you've identified in your research that make up what you refer to as the universal language of literacy?
Sure. So, Dr. Jackson, I never had the benefit of teaching in a perfect classroom, in a perfect building, in a perfect district, in a perfect state. Okay. And so I was always given teaching and leadership opportunities in schools where, our advanced kids could have been more advanced. Our proficient could have been more proficient. Our kids who were grappling to get to proficiency had not been exposed, but people were blaming the zip code. Because, underperformance is not about the zip code. It's about the quality of the instruction inside of the zip code. And that quality has to be consistent with access to the universal language of literacy. So you've heard of, we've all heard of 12 powerful words. And, in my research, that was an attempt by an educator to ensure that educators, or every tier of a student's instructional ecosystem, had calibrated understanding of important words that cross grade levels and disciplines. That was the impetus of those 12 powerful words. But in my research, I found, no matter where I've been as a teacher, as a leader, as a senior leader, when we calibrated on these 36 terms that live inside of every discipline, that live inside of every grade level, we catapulted children to proficiency. So let me give you a few examples. So these are terms, again, most folks call them tier 2 words, which are words that cross grade levels and disciplines. So a word like summarize. Children should be responsible for summarizing text in ELA in math, in science, and social studies. So that makes summarizing a universal term. The term analyze. You should analyze in all 4 core content areas plus your electives. And so that makes that term a universal term. And it is, we think of literacy as only foundational skills, like being able to sound out words and being able to create meaning of the words we've sounded out. But once you have sounded out, the lowest level of words, or you created meaning of the lowest level of words, there's a second level of words waiting for you as a reader. Those are universal terms that cross grade levels and disciplines. They live inside of core content and elective content standards, but they also live inside of core content and electives assessment opportunities. And so we could have taught kids, Dr. Jackson, but when they get to an assessment on their own, if they're unfamiliar or do not possess conceptual understanding of the universal language, the assessment question will make them look like they haven't been taught by us.
That's right. That's right. And you've used a description of standards a couple of times, and I want to dig into it for a second. You've referred to the nuanced expectations of the standards. And I've heard you say that several times. When you start talking about the nuanced expectation of the standards, what are you really digging into right there?
Yeah, sure. So one of the standards in your state and in most states, with the exception of Texas, is, children in 9th grade, they have to analyze U.S. seminal documents of historical and literary significance with a focus on themes, purposes, and rhetorical features. Okay, what the heck does that mean, right? And so if we are to make sure that children are prepared for whatever assessment opportunity they have in front of them, because we don't believe in teaching to the test, we believe in teaching to the rigor of the assessment. And if the standard says that children have to analyze U.S. seminal documents of historical and literary significance with a focus on themes, purposes, and rhetorical features, then everyone in that student's instructional ecosystem has to understand the nuances that are resident in that standard. And what do I mean by nuances? What does it mean to analyze something? It actually means to separate something into its constituent parts or elements. And you learn something about it when you analyze it, when you take it apart, right? So kids have to analyze U.S. seminal documents. So what makes those documents seminal? And what does seminal mean? It doesn't mean first, it means influential. And so inside of that standard is nuanced language. And without access to language, children won't be able to demonstrate that they've been taught by us.
That's right. That's so powerful. And I greatly appreciate it. And just listening to you, again, it just pulls me back to the excitement of being an educator, right? And the work of an educator is described as pedagogy, right? The art and science of teaching. And so when I say to you, art and science of teaching, particularly when we start talking about nuanced expectations of the standards and we get into the universal language of literacy, and I ask you to bring that home into art and science as a teacher. How do I bring to this work, this clarion call that you're giving, how do I bring to that work both the art and the science of teaching these foundational skills?
Sure. So if our children are going to read at the grade level expectation and beyond, that's what we want for our kids, yes?
Yes.
But across this country, far too many of our children don't read at the grade level expectation. Last time I checked, it was near 75%. 75%? That's pre-coronavirus. Right. And if you come from an economically disadvantaged household, that number is about 85%. And if you grapple with a disability, that number is about 95% of children who don't read at the grade level expectation. And so we've got to start saying to ourselves, is this an adult issue? Or is it a kid issue, or is it an adult and a kid issue? And if you ask me, it's both. That's not an indictment of educators. That's not an indictment of, families. That's not an indictment of students, but it is an opportunity for growth. And so let me get to the art and the science. Since this issue is at pandemic levels, right? Reading proficiency is at a pandemic level low. When we understand the art and the science of teaching children how to read, we not only get them to proficiency, we get them beyond the proficiency finish line. And so let me make this illustration. It is very difficult to innovate on top of quicksand. Right. So the science and the art and science is the foundation, and the art is the icing on the cake, or it's the innovation. It is individual teacher style that comes into play. But one must start with the science of teaching kids how to read. Now, there are a few bottlenecks that keep children from reading at the grade level expectation and beyond. And I go through them quickly. Number one, children have to know a finite number of sight words when they encounter words in the text, which means they have to know them on sight, and they don't follow decoding rules. Like there versus there, THERE and THEIR. One refers to position and one refers to possession. Does every child in our instructional ecosystem, do they know that set of sight words that they're supposed to know for the previous grade levels and the grade level that they're currently in? Where they don't read on grade level. And we've got to stop saying, these kids are low. This is my lowest group ever. Ooh, these kids are low. We can't admire that problem anymore, Dr. Jackson. We've got to resolve it. And how do you resolve it? The first step is to make sure they understand tier 1 words. Okay, then tier 2 words. Tier 2 words are words like analyze and describe and compare and contrast. Kids have to know those words because they live inside of more complex reading and assessment opportunities. Okay, and then once we get calibrated on the one term, then we can use the art around our understanding of the universal language of literacy. But you got to get to the science first. And the science says what? There are 36 of them you can't ignore. Right? Okay. And then tier 3 words, which are words that are made up, the words that kids typically see in a given content area, like onomatopoeia in an ELA class is a tier 3 word. Like equation is a tier 3 word in mathematics, so forth and so on. And those words are made up of word parts in a way that tier 1 words don't have any word parts. And the tier 2 words, only 6 of them have word parts. So if kids are going to understand the words that live inside of a particular content area, they've got to know Greek and Latin word parts. If not, they're going to see a series of words they don't understand, and they won't be able to subsequently do anything with the text that they just read. Okay, so what's the foundation? Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Now, if children are going, let's think about this, Dr. Jackson. What do we want kids to do? Not just consume informational text, not just consume literary text, but consume informational and literary text to go up the pyramid or to ascend the pyramid of cognitive demand, which is what I call cognitive pluralism. And I'll breathe here in a second. So once kids, Dr. Jackson, understand the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, right? And they know how to decode and they know how to create meaning of the words that they decoded, then they can do more than remember. They can do more than regurgitate information. They can fully conceptually understand information. That's step 2 in the level of cognitive demand. They can apply their understanding of concepts to those informational and literary texts. Like they can take a piece of text and apply their knowledge of summarizing to it, right? They can analyze a text. They can step back from it and pull it apart, and they can synthesize it and put it back together. They can evaluate an author's, the extent to which he or she accomplished the purpose of having written the text. And then they can create text for other people to evaluate and analyze and, and apply their skills to and understand and remember. But if you don't understand tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 words as the importance of them as an educator, then your art and your science will be off as it comes to supporting children on their journey to proficiency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm just sitting here thinking through all you just said. Like, I know I'll spend days unpacking this conversation as I reflect on all you're sharing in this moment. So thank you again so much for doing that. You started with this metaphor of the impossibility of innovating on quicksand. And it seems like innovation has become this big, huge bully club in education, where if we're not being innovative, we're not doing our job. But what you're so eloquently referencing is, if we don't have the foundation, if we don't have the science of teaching, if we don't have the science of literacy, it doesn't matter how innovative we are. It doesn't matter how creative, what technology tool we bring into the classroom, what gee whiz wow factor we have. If we don't have the foundation, if we don't have the science, we have failed. And I greatly appreciate you really pulling that out and highlighting that for all of us. There's go ahead, please.
I was just going to echo your comment by saying, Dr. Jackson, that there is no substitute for, children having access to educators who understand the ingredients for baking a proficiency pie. Right. So technology can't teach children. Technology can assess if children have been taught. But the teaching is part of the human condition. It's a part of the human exchange. And so I appreciate technology. I appreciate artificial technology. I appreciate advances in technology. But there's nothing better than an educator who cares about a student, has a relationship with them, and understands both the art and the science of teaching children how to read.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a phrase that I use quite often. I have the incredible pleasure and honor, really, to serve in an amazing school system, Carteret County Public School System. We have 20 wonderful schools. And one of the things I say a lot is that we aspire and desire to be a school system as opposed to a system of schools. And quite frankly, if we're not careful, when in districts with multiple schools and in schools with multiple classrooms and in grade levels with multiple teachers or departments with multiple teachers, we can become a system of pieces instead of a school system or a system in the school. And so as you've worked with school systems and schools across the country, and you encounter those places where there's not this universal understanding of the standards or the foundation, the science you're speaking of. What's the work there? How have you approached that for our ed leaders who may be struggling with that work, with just trying to get everybody on the same page? What are the early steps in that work?
Yeah, there's been a great deal of empirical research, Dr. Jackson, and it suggests that the train-the-trainer model is insufficient to, turn the tide, so to say. And so it's trainer the trainer is expeditious, right? It allows you to, at least conceptualize sending a message out through each of the branches of the organization. But if you remember being a little kid and playing the game with the cans, like aluminum cans, you were passing a message. Right. That message started with, different words that it ended up with. And so a great deal gets lost in translation when we train the trainer. So I think it's important for anyone who's thinking about, strategic planning and the nexus of strategic planning and professional development to think of professional development as a multi-tiered process. And so take the message directly to instructional paraprofessionals from the horse's mouth. Take the message directly to your teaching population. Take the message directly to teacher leaders, directly to assistant principals, directly to principals, directly to principal supervisors, directly to folks in Title I who are making decisions about what principals can and cannot purchase. Take it directly to the folks who are writing the curriculum. Take it directly to the chief level instructional person in the district, because you don't want the work of the left hand, the good work of the left hand, to be undone by the good work of the right hand. Right?
That's exactly.
So, go ahead, Doc.
No, I was going to say, you're exactly right. We've got to be aligned across the organization, and we've got to draw that alignment together. And as you were sharing that with taking the work directly to the paraprofessionals, to the teachers, to the administrators, et cetera, what was going on in my head was from the musical Hamilton. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah. It's one of my favorites. My wife is tired of listening to it because I've always got it on. I love it. And one of my favorite songs in that musical, Aaron Burr is singing and bemoaning not being in the room. And as you're talking about taking that message directly to all of the members of our school system, all the staff, all the faculty, what I kept thinking about was they need to be in the room when we're talking and having this conversation around the universal language of literacy. They need to be in the room when we're talking about the art and science of teaching. And so I just appreciate you really sharing and at a deep level and the passion with which you advocate for this work. And if you don't mind, Dr. Dickey, I'd like to kind of change the direction of our conversation just a little bit, because I don't like to miss many opportunities. And so I just want to share with you that each year for several years, I've participated in the one word. And for the year, I choose one word as you get to January 1st. And each year that word kind of becomes a a focus and an opportunity to really think about and reflect on throughout the year, the one word. And so my one word for 2021 is resilience. Previously, pre-pandemic, I'd done a lot of work around ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and really was beginning to work around understanding what is resilience. And then this pandemic has just slammed all of us as educators. I'm just worried to death about our youngest learners who have had, in our area of the state, 2 years of hurricanes that kept them out of school for a significant amount of time, and then a pandemic, so they were out of school again, even though we're doing our best to try to teach them remotely. And so this year, I'm really focused on understanding resilience. And your dissertation just jumped off the page with me, resilience among African American boys. And so I know that could be a whole other podcast episode, but I just wonder if you'd speak for a few moments to resilience and what does that word mean to you, and what is its role in 2021? And I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I have the opportunity to sit with you, and I got to ask this question.
Yeah. So I alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation, Dr. Jackson, that I grew up in abject poverty outside of Houston, Texas. And, and I'm a member of what some might argue as, one of the lowest echelons of American society. I'm an African-American male. And, as it comes to educational attainment, as it comes to health and wellness, as it comes to economics, African-American males, hover in the lowest quartile in many of those data sets. And, my focus has been on all children, but I view the world through having been in this group, right? Grappling to get to the surface. And that you're right, the dissertation is, I studied, African-American middle school, African-American males who, in spite of everything that was stacked against them, they achieved. And what I wanted to know is, why were you resilient? And I had to control my researcher bias because I meet the what do you call it? The litmus test for what is resilient.
Right.
So I had to control my bias toward resilience. And so here's what they said to me. And this applies to not only African-American male students, but this applies to all race-based groups. This applies to all service groups. That when you make up your mind that you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, then you encourage yourself, even if your environment does not encourage you. You see education for what it is. You value education, or one values education because of what it represents. And the minute that, we can impress upon our children how important it is to plug into the schooling experience that is being provided for them, the more we're going to be able to close the educational attainment gaps. Because schooling gaps create young adult and older adult attainment gaps. Right. And so many kids from disadvantaged households, from marginalized communities, have yet to view education for what it is. It doesn't guarantee opportunities, but it certainly does provide access. And so that word resilience is always in my head, Dr. Jackson, and hopefully I'm communicating here, clearly. It is important to me to make sure that we create conditions that support resilience. And that's what I learned in my research. And what are those conditions? I'll just give you a couple of them. Gradual release of responsibility is a resilience condition, which means what? Show children what we want them to be able to ultimately do at the end of a lesson or at the end of a series of lessons, and then create opportunities for them to start taking on more of the responsibility to think and to read and to speak and to write. And when we hold their hands just a little bit, folks who are resilient or folks who are determined to make it in spite of everything that is around them, they're going to take the bull by the horns and they're going to show you and they'll show everybody else who thought they couldn't do it that they could do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so graduate's responsibility, Dr. Jackson, it's not just, I do, we do, you do. It is moving children from total dependence upon the teacher to total independence. And that's a process, and it's a condition of resilience.
Yes. And I would add, and I know you would too, and encouraging them along the way when they are, as you're gradually releasing that responsibility and they experience success, to call out the success they're experiencing along the way to just encourage them. I think so very important. And, as I think about your life experiences, you've just kind of highlighted a bit, and as we think about those young men, particularly in this moment, we're talking about African-American males who have been successful, who are successful, who really just triumph despite statistics that say maybe they shouldn't. Figuring out and pulling out what has helped them is so that I'm desperate for that knowledge to do everything that I can as someone who deeply cares and who wants to believe in the American dream that every child can grow up to be president regardless of zip code. And I think it goes back, and I know our time draws close, but I think it goes back to where we started, which is that ubiquitous, equitable access to both the art and science of teaching, to ensuring that we really have content knowledge across our school system, and we have phenomenal educators across the school system. And so as we kind of come to the end of our time here, and I wish we had just days and days to continue to converse, because it's such a gift that you're giving to me and to the listeners of EdLeader, this gift of your time. Thank you, and your talents and your message. I wonder if there's any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners as we go from this moment into what I hope will very quickly be a post-pandemic moment, those things that we might keep in the forefront as we move forward in this journey together.
Yes, Dr. J. Literacy opportunities must not be relegated to the English language arts classroom or to the English language arts block only, right? Literacy must be infused in every teaching and assessment opportunity that we present to our students. And so how do you do that? That's just quickly here. If kids are in a science class and they are responsible for comparing and contrasting acquired traits to inherited traits, someone's got to stop the presses to make sure that kids know what compare means, what inherited means, what acquired means, what trait means before we go too far in that instruction. That's literacy.
That's right.
Children are working in math classrooms across the country, and I visited some even during the pandemic. And I walked in on a classroom where kids were working on solving equations. I asked one of the children what an equation is, and he could not tell me. And I asked another one, and he could not tell me. So why are children working on equations and they don't understand what an equation is conceptually? That's a missed opportunity to promote literacy. And so how better could a child perform academically if they understood what they were working on conceptually? So look at the word equation, equal. I see equal inside of it. I see TION suffix at the end of it. So what's an equation? TION means process, equal, process of making something equal, right? So what you do to one side equals sign, you do the other side. That's literacy. And so what I leave folks with, infuse literacy inside of every teaching and learning opportunity and make no assumptions about what children understand conceptually. When we don't make that assumption, we catapult them to proficiency. When we give them access, that's what equitable access is. It's language. And the absence of an understanding of language, every classroom period feels like a child is walking into a German speaking classroom. I wouldn't be engaged either. I wouldn't be attendant either.
That's right. You're exactly right, Dr. Dickey. Listen, thank you again for spending time with me today, with our listeners today. What a blessing it is. And in this moment, I just want to encourage you in your work. Thank you for speaking up and speaking out. Thank you for working with schools and school districts. Thank you for this opportunity you have to really think deeply and to do the research around things like the universal language of literacy and identifying those 36 terms, and then bringing that back to the forefront for educators across our country and around the world. My friend, I want to encourage you. I want to thank you. And I just want to share my great appreciation for this time together. Dr. Dickey, thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. If you need me again, you call me and I'll come running.
I'll take you up on that, Dr. Dickey.
All righty. Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed our time today with Dr. Dickey. He made it very clear when he said,
literacy must be infused inside of every teaching and learning opportunity that we present to our students.
Literacy must be infused in all that we do. Thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for all that you do for every student, every teacher, and every staff member. You are making a difference. If no one else has told you, I want you to know that I believe in you. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the EdLeader podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we may continue to grow the EdLeader community. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with Dr. Jackson. Until next time.